Hello, everybody. This is your host Noopur, and today I'm really excited to have Jon Kern with us for this interview where we'll be talking about Agile Manifesto still being relevant. Let me let you know about Jon a bit. He is a co-author of Agile Manifesto. He is an aerospace engineer by training. He's passionate about helping teams succeed in delivering business value through software. He works with teams to articulate, design, architect, and deliver software that solves challenging business problems. Welcome, Jon. Welcome to this interview.
Uh, Thank you, Nupur. My pleasure to be here.
So, Jon, most of us know you for being an original signatory, one of the original signatories for Agile Manifesto. How did you become a part of Agile Manifesto signatories in 2001?
Yeah, I think it certainly wasn't because I was one of the famous people in the room. You know, there were especially Bob Martin. You know, matter of fact, I was on a fun call with him with Bob and James Grenning just yesterday morning, and I mentioned to Bob that I still have some magazines from the days when we used to read about software in published publications like magazines, and I'm pretty sure he was in many of the magazines. I don't remember if it was C++ Report or Dr. Dobbs Journal or anyway. Bob Martin, I think, started the ball rolling with sending out invitations. I happened to be working at the time with Peter Code, and we were doing feature-driven development. And Peter Code was an author. I was a co-author with Peter Code on some books. And, so Peter Code was actually the person who got, I think, the contact from Bob, because Bob, found Peter's email. And then Peter knew that was something that would be good for me to go to. So I look at it as it was a bit of luck, but it was also, I think oftentimes folks mistake luck for being actually, when preparedness meets opportunity. So that's how I ended up getting there. It was from Bob Martin reaching out to Peter Code, and I was working with Peter Code together. We founded TogetherSoft, and I had published my own lightweight methodology in 1995, I think it was, in some strange Lotus Notes books of all places. And so yeah, it was a sort of a strange circuitous manner by which I got there. But yeah, I think Bob Martin kind of kicked it off with trying to get people together.
Yeah, one very nice point that you have highlighted, that opportunity may come, but you need to be prepared for that. And I'm sure that opportunity all you 17 had, you all were prepared so much that now we have those principles with us which are guiding the industry. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I will also say, as part of my career, kind of my career path, initially working in research and development of cruise missile engines, and then flight simulation, and working with, kind of as a government contractor. I was also able to appreciate what heavyweight process was like, so my career path found me facing many, what you would call, waterfall type processes, inefficiencies, waste, a ton of waste, and also, in many senses, illusions of progress and building things, and, illusions and thinking I can write a proposal for some research type effort that we know needs a lot of feedback and will take many different courses, but we pretend. So I think part of my preparedness was also witnessing firsthand the kind of the lunacy behind waterfall in the large.
Right. So Jon, it's been 20 years since the Agile Manifesto was published. Do you think it is still relevant? Do you find it relevant?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get it frequently. And people will often say, "So, would you change anything about it?" No, So I can very quickly say, yes, it's relevant, and no, I wouldn't change a thing. And I believe if you looked at the 4 values, they still work for me. They still apply today. I haven't seen any kind of great shift in how we produce software that makes any of those go away. And yeah, I might have to look at each of the individual 12 principles and wonder if maybe some of them have grown a little old, but I think even most of those probably still are very applicable. And I've said this many times, and I make sure to say it with incredible humility, because it's a big analogy to compare the fact that 17 of us sort of randomly got together and almost miraculously were able to agree on 4 basic principles that we thought reflected kind of almost the abstract gist of what each practitioner had discovered from doing more lighter weight methods. And I liken that to getting to the essence of the problem, much like the United States founding documents, like the Declaration of Independence. If you read that, it's pretty hard to say that that won't apply forever as long as there are humans. And that's where the deep humility comes, because that document has spurred on millions and millions of people into freedom for centuries, and well, almost 3 centuries. So that's why I say with humility, but it's the same kind of thing. It's when you kind of crack the code or get to the essence of the underlying principles, they are enduring. So that's why I think the Agile Manifesto is fine to be a document up on the wall and untouched. It also solved a problem of its day. So I'm not saying it might not at some point grow old, but I still believe that it really seemed to capture how we do software and how people behave, so to speak. And I think that's enduring. Long
Yes,
answer, but I think it's important.
yeah, and that's the biggest example of being agile, I guess. 17 people gathered together, agreeing to certain things, is the biggest example because they were driven by a purpose. There was a purpose behind it. So that's
That's a great
commendable.
point. I've reflecting on it during this year, because there's been many questions around the 20th anniversary, and I've looked at that, even the web page again, and reflecting on that web page. At the top, it talks about, it uses a very active voice. It uses "we are uncovering," not "we have figured it out," but "we are uncovering." So even that was a big dose of humility and a sense of it's not done. It may never be done, but it's a snapshot in time. And then we prefer this over that kind of a little, some might call it ambiguity, and others might call it, no, it's called context matters. And to your point, we had a good problem statement. We were facing at the time, large heavyweight processes were the dominant winner, so to speak, of the day. Whether it was rational unified process, when I was doing Defense Department, it was MIL standard 2167, and there was some other kind of standard too that I don't remember the number. And that's kind of what we were up against. There were large forces, so to speak, that were stronger than many of us doing things in the small. And having that vision, it's much like a good software development team. If you have a good product vision, you can, and you get a good cross-functional team together, give them the autonomy to figure out how to reach that goal. You've just pointed out that even the process that we took, represented a more agile approach to doing, producing something. So that's actually, I never thought of it like that. But you're right. We had a very clear goal and vision in mind.
And
So good
that's
point.
commendable. Thank you. So, John, a lot of people are implementing Agile for namesake as well. So, what do you consider to be fake Agile in today's world?
Yeah, I kind of use that term a little tongue in cheek, and sometimes it sounds like it could be hurtful to say something is fake, because obviously it's real, they're doing it. But the reason to use that term for me is I see folks who start off with the right ideas and they begin maybe with Scrum. They read the Scrum. I first learned about Scrum 20 years ago. I never heard of it until we were gathering and explaining to each other our various methodologies, looking for some commonalities. And I was like, oh, Scrum, that's cool. Yeah, it looks like just a project management framework. Doesn't matter if you're building a barn or building software, or it was just a nice outer loop and inner loop process. It made a lot of sense. And it didn't have anything to do with software from what I could tell. So starting with something is good, but if you fall into the trap, so to speak, of not learning from your practice, and it's a little bit about trying to achieve mastery. So if you do it by the book and a year later you're doing the same, I dub that as fake agile. You're just going through some motions. You're not actually sort of grasping the fundamentals about agile, that developers and business people, really need to understand is you can't just keep doing the same thing and expect different results if you're not like Scrum says, inspect and adapt. But I think a lot of people throw that out, or they don't understand how to do it, or they don't feel empowered to be able to make changes. So a lot of times what happens in organizations, I love working with small teams best, and I love doing actual product development, helping a team go from the idea to something up and running, and high performing teams and high performing development environment. But what happens often is as an organization grows, or the teams grow, they turn into kind of more cooperation and doing handoffs. And so if you're doing a lot of handoffs, if suddenly all the business requirements are decided up front, and you're not even involved as a team, and it's very waterfall up front, and even if the team is incredibly agile, you're still, as an organization, that's fake agile, because the team is limited by the external forces, so to speak. So also, I see specialization. I like to say I'm a generalizing specialist. I probably, maybe if I had to say I had an expertise, it might be around modeling or something like that. But I'm not really an expert in anything. But I know enough about a lot of things, and I know when I need an expert, and I can call for an expert. But I see a lot of organizations turn in, make user experience, a really scarce resource, and then demand it's used all over the place, creating a bottleneck. I see that's not agile. I see teams that do development and then throw it over the wall to some QA team, sometimes in India, like not even in the same time zone. That's not agile. Right. So, even though someone might say, well, we're doing Scrum sprint ceremonies and planning, we're doing all this stuff, but then inside they're actually working in extremely waterfall ways, that's fake agile. It's really, if you don't have an understanding that everyone's responsible for that delivery of value to the customer, that understanding that vision, the vision should be putting smiles on the faces, not I got my job done, boop, throw it over the wall, and let's see if I can develop faster than QA can test. And then you build up a backlog there, right? None of that's agile. That's just you're just perfecting your own little silo. Let me write all the requirements up front and try to write as much as I can so I don't need to talk to you. That's not agile. So that's what I mean by fake agile. It's those sorts of common practices that really tell me that you don't quite understand what I might say the agile mindset is.
All right. So apart from doing fake agile, there are some common mistakes that the new age agilists make. What do you think those mistakes are?
Yeah, that's a good follow-up because it kind of I started touching on them. So the I don't like to demoralize an audience when I'm speaking, but I know I've done some Scrum Day events, and I don't like to say Scrum. Scrum does not equal Agile because that sounds a little harsh. But the point is, it gets back to if you just by virtue of following a recipe, never try to experiment or put it in the context that you work in or do things that make the process more sort of reflective of your world. And like it's a bit about you don't truly understand what value is, and you'd be shocked sometimes teams that we do value stream workshops with, that is the first exercise. All right, what's your business purpose? Why are we here? What is value in your world? And sometimes we're actually doing value stream workshops for non-software teams, right? So it doesn't just apply to software. If you don't understand value, and I'm not saying if you're a new hire fresh out of school, or I'm talking about if you've been around for a little while and you're still don't and you're just coding away and you don't understand what value means, that's one of the biggest mistakes. Because if you have a good understanding of your customer and what makes them smile and pay money, to pay our salary, if you truly don't understand that, then you have a high degree of probability you are being wasteful, maybe building too much, maybe kind of just falling into a pattern of I'm just doing I'm kind of a cog in a machine. I'm just doing my little part, and someone has designed this machine. Like, I don't really like the term software factory because that it implies it's that repetitive that I could design things like a machine, and if everybody does their machine part and I turn the crank at the front, the machine spits out a car. I don't think, we're not producing 10 of the same features, right? I don't need 10 authentication features. I just need one. So, it's unfortunately that factory mentality, Taylorism, or whatever you might want to call it, that's a big mistake in a lot of agilists, so to speak. So I think that's part of probably the biggest element is really understand what value means, strive endlessly to achieve value as fast as possible, and to try to test your ideas about what value means with your customers, and be humble about it.
All right. Thank you, John, for sharing this input for the new age agilist. And it might have been asked to you a couple of times, and I am asking you again because it's been often talked about. Is agile coming to an end? And what does the future entail?
Well, yeah, I think, there was some dopey post by somebody about, Agile is dead, like a statement of fact. And I don't know, I think it's clickbait trolling. It's really a stupid thing to say, just because. I know it's not a good phrase, but yeah, that would be like saying doing things more pragmatically is, yeah, we don't need that anymore. Since when? So along those lines, Agile is not dead, nor is lean. And it really is understanding there's a great book that I like to talk about that our son introduced me to called 2 Second Lean, something like that. And it's a funny little read. It's about a businessman who was producing products for sale, like simple little products, but he was becoming successful, and he thought he had a pretty lean, setup. And lo and behold, it wasn't even close. Like some people came in, showed him what to do. So the hard part of thinking you might have it nailed and you might have it perfect, the humbling aspect is you can often always do better. And Agile really is about trying to, the inspect and adapt. That doesn't always end. You might start pretty poorly, and then be able to kind of hone in on a optimal flow. But usually, since we aren't just making cars all of the time, that optimal flow often gets disturbed by new things, new context, new requests, new major features, new products, things like that. So the reason why Agile won't come to an end is because the basic values, the basic ways to improve and get better, I don't think ever end. I personally think Agile is one of the toughest. Like you might think safe is easy, right? Because like in some sense, safe tells you everything you need to do. It's just a giant process. But if you hire, a couple dozen extra people just to manage the process, it's much easier because it tells you every step of the way. Even though I know Dean Leffingwell probably would say, "Oh, that's not what it's meant to be." Yeah, I know. Same thing with rational unified process, a giant diagram full of cogs and roles and people and activities and templates and process maps and menus and right, all that kind of stuff in the hands of a true agilist. We'll throw away stuff we don't need and use the stuff we like. That makes sense. And I think that's why Agile will never come to an end, because it takes it takes that more of the Agile mindset to kind of constantly be reevaluating. What are we doing? Are we getting value out of it? So I think it's timeless. And for the future, there's some good work. Josh Karefsky in Modern Agile. Alistair's got the heart of Agile, and I'm probably forgetting others. So there's plenty of room to do something else. But I believe, from my perspective, Agile is going to be enduring for quite some time, because it's really, in my mind, it's a lot about being pragmatic. So I don't think that ever
Yeah.
comes to an end.
All right, all right. So as we're coming to the end of this discussion, John, please share three key mantras to stay agile for an organization.
Yeah, I used to be, the first one is something I would, it's a little bit like, I use another analogy before I get in there, but I used to say, there's a Gang of Four patterns book, many different software patterns you can apply, dozens and dozens. But if I were to pick one, I would say separation of concerns, like the layered approach, uh, model view controller, all kinds of things. And similarly in Agile, if I'm gonna tell you the first most important one, and a lot of other things can kind of derive from it, but I like to say mind the gap, and I talk about a gap in time. And I know you've heard this before, but it really is, the simplest way to think about it is what we want to reduce is when we take an action, whether it's writing a line of code or creating a new major feature set or a new product. When we take an action, how long before we get feedback that that was the right thing to do? Because in between those two, typically, is money being spent, not money being earned. And, or some kind of cost and no value, because some things, may not, something might be just benefiting, making something simpler, not necessarily an exchange of money. But the idea is everything we do around product development, and frankly, this applies beyond software, but if you take the approach that we all assume we know what we're doing, we think we've got a good idea about what we should deliver, how we should deliver it, et cetera, right? So like nobody comes into work thinking I'm just going to do something boneheaded and dumb. Like no, we all try to come in and do something positive and successful. So the point is, the second two mantras are being humble and being curious. So, but that goes into, why? Well, if you're humble about what you think you need to do, maybe you'll take smaller steps. Maybe you'll deliver slightly less than you think you need, and admit the answer typically is not within the room of especially software development teams with customers that are outside, so to speak. Right, so since the mid 2000s, I've worked on an application for firefighters, and so for sure I work with firefighters to help build this, but as kind of the development arm, I'm not a firefighter, so for sure the answer is not in in me. So I have to ask, or when I was working with, doing insurance applications, literally, or working with a major paint manufacturer about color stuff, right? Sitting and working and talking to the actual customers and even the business experts. That's where, the true knowledge of what you need is going to come from. So if you can figure out how to continually slice and make smaller the time between doing something and getting feedback, that's the one rule. But add to that the humility, and treat things like a hypothesis is what I like to see. Feature ideas, I got tons of them, but treat them like a hypothesis. And what's the cheapest way to test a hypothesis? And sometimes I see really big hypotheses about a product or a big chunk of a product, and the only way they tested it was building it and then putting it out to the customers, only to find it didn't meet needs. To the best of everyone's ability, they thought it would. And they'll say, well, we talked to customers and we did this and we did that. That's the worst way to learn that you built the wrong thing. There's no recovering from that, right? So, and the whole idea about being curious, even being curious about, I wonder if we rearranged a little bit, like what if we took some of that quality assurance work? And I started this as an example now it'll be like 21 years ago. Because I remember I was in St. Petersburg, Russia, working with one of the best development teams I've ever worked with. And we were building a brand new product. And I had the idea that, what? How about we bring a co-located team together in this office space near where my apartment was. And that meant some people moved from the bigger office to the smaller office where a team and I had been working, including the QA people and some technical documentation people. So this was TogetherSoft and, back in the days of CDs and having, help documentation. So that required a lot of political capital on my part. It didn't matter if I was a co-founder, it didn't matter if I'm the boss, which I loved about, that's the kind of team I want. Status shouldn't have anything to do with vetting an idea. So bringing those teams together after much, sort of arm wrestling and gnashing of teeth, that taught me an incredible lesson in because I would start new feature ideas. First off, I kept being able to repeat the vision of what the product is. But as we were building it in small chunks, I'd be able to talk. In the beginning, we'd have discussions with the technical documentation people, with the quality engineers, and with the developers and the architect, myself, and a UI. Right? We'd have those discussions early on just to get some ideas out there and get things rolling. Versus in the old way, QA would come after dev and technical documentation would be the last to know about it, right? So that's what I mean by curiosity. It'd be really, it was satisfying my curiosity. Like, what if we could bring some of that knowledge transfer and input up front and be able to discover things sooner rather than later. So I think maybe as an engineer, I think our job, even in software development, is risk mitigation, to mitigate risks and to be curious about what could cause a problem. Not to say that you'll never, discover things on the fly, but the idea about being curious from everything from, gee, why does Jira really need to be configured like this? It's horrible. Well, no, it doesn't, because I've been using Jira forever and it works fine. But yeah, so like, be curious about tools and be curious about process. But why does QA have to be after? A QA should want to be able to influence it up front. Be curious about what kind of trends are going on in your software realm. So anyway, mind the gap, reduce the gap in time, be humble, and be curious. Those are my three go-to, because I think that will serve well into the future.
Thank you, John. I'm definitely going to remember to mind the gap, be humble, and be curious. And I'll try to pass on this three mantras to as many people as I can. Thank you once again, John, for being part of this discussion. It was wonderful to have you with me and getting to learn a lot from you. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, Nupur. Anytime. Always love talking about this stuff.